Hey guys, how's it going? Swell Suit and No Hair Product here, and welcome to Black Desert Kunoichi Succession Guide. Yeah, you guys have been waiting for this, so here it is. And let's just jump quickly right into this, because hopefully I can pack all this. I might not have everything here, but it is a lot of details that I want to go over, and there are probably other things that you can probably figure out beyond this guide by yourself, because I can't remember all of it because there's just so many things going on. As much as it's just an extension to pre-awakening, just for to get off the bat for people deciding between Succession and Awakening. The things you get in Succession is a lot of movement, extreme burst movement. You've also got extreme burst damage in a sense, but then you also trade off from the Awakening a lot of life steal and super armor sustain and some fairly big AoE to some extent. As far as I'm concerned though, I actually prefer Succession quite a bit more than Awakening, even though it's a lot less protected than Awakening. Awakening itself I didn't really like because there was 2 or 3 skills that just are completely unused, whereas Succession I actually use absolutely everything on this tree here. So in terms of a skill point concern, you need about 1970 to kind of get everything you kind of want. Or for me it was anyways, for everything I wanted to use, and that pretty much encompassed everything here. Kunai Stab was mostly, I wasn't really sure about picking this up. I still have it, I don't lock it, I just let it go off whenever sometimes. So this one is kind of optional, it's really a preference. I don't think it's too good or too bad per se, but it has helped in situations sometimes. Floor Sweeping, this is for the down attack damage, which is absolutely insane when you have it on. You don't necessarily need to use this mid-combat, but it does give that down attack 10% damage, just even having it at level 1 and triggering it in hitting the air for PvP reasons or whatever. But in mid-grind of PvE, I don't really use this that much unless the mobs are actually knocked down, like places like super high-end places like Akhman or Star's End, for instance, when you blow up a crystal. That's just like some examples where I would actually probably try and trigger the buff for PvE. Shadow Slash, use this quite a bit for WP recovery. For Succession, WP is a pretty big problem, so make sure you get Brace at least up to absolute, like as soon as you can. There's a lot of WP problems if you don't use Brace every time it's on cooldown, and if you don't use Shadow Slash into a group of mobs quite often for that attack speed buff. Ghost Greeting is also needed to be taken to absolute, but you have to hit targets for that attack speed buff, which is why Shadow Slash is still good, because you can get that 5% attack speed without needing to hit anything. And that stacks with the skill add-ons that you put on for Kuno here. Ankle Cutter you obviously need. This is a very important skill for Succession. It's part of her mobility kit. Ghost Greeting as well, and as well as Crescent Slash. The seemingly useless skill is mostly just for movement and maybe like a chip shot sometimes. Could cause floating on whatever the heck you hit it with, but very unlikely you'll be using it for that. Fox Claw for Succession is pretty much your lifesteal skill. This is probably the reliable life skill that I've experienced while playing Succession. And Shadow Stomp and Shadow Clone, you need this because these are pretty much primary damage skills for Succession. Flash Slash, I was actually really hesitant about this at first, but once I sort of learned more cancels with Succession, this thing is actually really powerful, so it is definitely worth taking. I thought it was going to be slow as hell until you know how to use Smokescreen. Okay, Smokescreen is one of the most important skills for Succession for Kuno, because this just kind of chains all sorts of things into it, and you can cancel so many different skills with this thing. So Smokescreen is a must get, and you have to bring it up to level absolute or 5 or whatever it is here, the max, because it lowers the cooldown, and you absolutely need this to cool down as fast as you can, because you want to be using this thing all the time. It's helps in every situation, and that evasion buff is very useful to have it on as long as possible. And then we move on to Ninjutsu Shackles. I don't really use this for PvE. It does hit really hard in Succession. The absolute version here is obviously not as hard as Succession. Succession is way harder. It's 1774 x5, 100% crit. The movement slow on this is really strong, minus 50%. Definitely used to catch people in PvP and just pretty much end them after that. Down thrust, not really used because you got Shadow Explosion. Tendon Cutter, obviously you need this. This is one of your most famous techniques. It'd be a shame not to pick it up. Black Moonlight, it's kind of nice to have, but not really like a necessary priority off the bat. Shadow Explosion, you want this for sure. It's not really good in pre-awakening, but once you bring it to Succession, this thing hits super hard when it's off CD, off cooldown. And obviously your passive always pick it up. Same with HP and that. So just to reiterate, you need at least Crescent Slash up for some movement bonus. You need the Fatal Blow for sure, and the Flow. The Brace to maximum, otherwise you're going to be chugging WP pots up the A. On top of that, this gives some HP recovery, which helps in situations. Floor Sweeping, not really. Kunai Throw, not necessary, but I like it just because of the extra damage, because you use this most of the time to cancel into Shadow Stomp anyway, so it's just extra damage boost. Shadow Slash for sure, because of WP recovery and also attack speed buff. Smokescreen, definitely a must. Ankle Cutter, definitely a must. Ghost Greeting, definitely a must. Foxclaw, semi-optional. Shadow Stomp, Shadow Clone, definitely want it. Flash Slash, definitely want it. Shackles, it's like slow enough where it's not like a must skill, but Tendon Cutter for sure, and Shadow Explosion for sure. And the rest is just optional if you want in terms of priority, but you should get them eventually. Otherwise, you're gonna run out of skills to use. Now, in terms of Succession, these mark things that you get from landing your attacks, it's basically centered around these three skills: Shadow Stomp, Shadow Clone, and Shadow Explosion. Everything kind of banks off of Shadow Explosion, as this is the slowest cooldown. I really wish this skill was lowered down to either 14 seconds or 13 or something like that, or the same CD as Shadow Clone, but it's not. It's 16 seconds. And the only way to get your hardest hitting attack, which is Wheel of Wrath, to go off is to tag a target or X number of targets with Shadow Stomp, Shadow Clone, and Shadow Explosion, with Shadow Explosion coming out at the end and not the beginning, and then using Wheel of Wrath after all three hit something to get the biggest hit possible from the skills, to get that ninjutsu release, to do that 12-14 times 12. Extra second hit damage. This is extreme. I tested it on some guild members. The Danse Macabre hits really hard too, as 1871 times 6, but for some reason when I use the Wheel of Wrath one, that second hit explosion hits way harder. It might be because of the accuracy modifier being so much higher, of like an extra 22%. Even though the damage scaling on Danse Macabre is way higher, so it might almost be equivalent, but then it wasn't after testing. So Wheel of Wrath really is the hardest hitting one after you land all three marks. Either way, it's not too big of a deal to try and land all three marks, because that's quite difficult in some situations, and it might end up getting you killed, so don't always worry about that. Also, trying to get Shadow Stomp off, which just requires Shadow Explosion buff, plus the Shadow Stomp buff, and Shadow Stomp will hit like super hard as well. It's 1542 times 12 with an accuracy rate of 25%. The only problem here that you have is critical. Critical is not exactly high for Kuno for some of the skills that are really hard hitting. You do have a passive 5% bonus at base, and probably a 20% off crit 5, and if you got some skill add-ons, you can reach about 45%. Just inherent on anything with no crit. It's not as high as like some other classes, but the damage burst when they do trigger is extreme, and if you can tag all of it on like one person to finish off with a Wheel of Wrath at the end, you're more than likely gonna blow somebody up if you catch all three on the person. Any of these skills, when they hit them, they also lose 20 DP for 5 seconds. It doesn't stack with the Ankle Cutter, unfortunately. Ankle Cutter also has DP minus 20 here. So that's kind of disappointing that these two don't stack, but then again, minus 40 DP would be pretty insane. Fatal Blow itself hits also extremely hard and really fast. It's 1736 times 4. And it's 100% crit, so you should also use this as damage too, because it really does hit super hard compared to the pre-awakening tree, which it only hits times 2. So it's literally double damage in succession. So Fatal Blow really hurts, and then if you have the flow, it does it twice, so it's like double damage of double damage. And yeah, it just like big spike from this thing. Now Foxclaw, obviously, I only use this for lifesteal, and I don't spam it very often because it is quite slow, and you can actually cancel the damage with a Ghost Step by accident, which means you're just negating damage out of nowhere for no reason. And Shackles is obviously just a catch. Crescent for movement, and Danse Macabre for also movement or catching people. Same with Tendon Cutter for catching people. Flash Slash to kind of jabate people into attacking, or like AoE. It's a full 360 circular AoE, almost screen wide. Very, very powerful, and should be used. Should also lock a Ninja Evasion. This doesn't do much other than get you killed. Target Chase for running around places, very useful. And there was one other skill here that I wanted to enforce, but I don't quite remember. Oh, and Block Jump. That's what it was. Block Jump. Block Jump is also very useful. So when you use Block Jump and Smokescreen, you also get your the very first mark buff. Looks like a Z icon, which you also get by triggering from just using Shadow Stomp. But if you don't want to really waste the Shadow Stomp, you can kind of just Block Jump or Smokescreen, and then if you hit something with like a Shadow Explosion just to begin with, and you have those buffs on, and then you tag somebody with Shadow Stomp, like you just hit somebody with Shadow Stomp, then you Smokescreen straight into a Shadow Stomp, and it hits super hard. Okay, you might just end up like one-shotting a person just by running through them like that. You don't want to use the kunai cancel because the kunai will actually absorb the ninjutsu ghost buff. So if you do that, then your Shadow Explosion buff will still be on, but your Shadow Stomp won't get that boosted damage. So you kind of want to pick and choose when to use the kunai if you feel like bursting somebody, or if you just want that cancel quicker, because the Smokescreen cancel is just about as fast. But you have so much utility with Smokescreen to cancel it into Flash Slash and other things as well, that sometimes you may or may not want to choose that. So it's really kind of situationally dependent, which makes it a bit more difficult to play the class, which I don't mind. But other times people will just choose one thing and stick with it and roll with it. For me, I like to swap it every now and then for whatever the situation calls and go with that. So just to keep in mind with the things that activate the ghost buff. In terms of the soul buff, I almost never get to activate the soul buff or the shadow clone, which causes bleeding. I wouldn't really worry too much about that. You can actually put a lot of dots on people with skill add-ons. There's poison, there's burn, there's bleed, there's other bleed, there's pain, and yeah, and then there's slow and high burn. It's a lot of dots that you can place on people. I've never really tried that. It probably works against more tankier targets if you don't really have an AP to do that stuff, because the damage is quite intense as well, just from all the debuffs that you can place on somebody really quickly. So really, Succession boils down to really feeling like an assassin class for once. I don't feel like I'm a Beyblade tank anymore. Even though like the Beyblade tank is actually very effective, but I actually do prefer the Succession over the Awakening, even though I like the Awakening weapon. It's just that I wish the Saw Spree and the Chain Crash wasn't like so useless or so long and pointless. And that's pretty much my gripe about Awakening, and they never changed it. So that's why I prefer Succession. Alright, so that's just the skills overview. The E buff is actually really strong. They nerfed it and took out the evasion rate on it, which kind of sucks, but oh well, we still got Smokescreen that can still be activated while this is on there. And this allows Ghost Step to double in range, so you can actually catch people quite well. So I would say in terms of Kunoichi's movement burst, is just you can catch people like really easily. So like probably from somewhere from this tree, you can probably get all the way up to that Serendius soldier at the other tree over there. But it takes a bit of like work. And then you can get all the way over to him quite quickly. So there's the skills here is pretty much like, I want to say like Blink Strike. It's like blink striking people. If you play Dota 2, you probably know what blink strikes are. So Block Jump is kind of like a blink strike. So it just kind of repositions your character right next to the target. So Block Jump is pretty much a blink strike because you just go right to them. So is Tendon Cutter as well. When you cancel it, it blinks you into people, and same with Danse Macabre. If you aim it, it lets you go right into the person as well. So that functionality is quite different from what it is in Awakening for Danse Macabre, because it doesn't have a lock-on, but in Succession it does. And if you have a lock-on, you can actually get to your target and it'll blink you right there. Crescent Slash doesn't have that though. It only gives you a boost forward when it's off cooldown. So I have my skill icons set up here in a sense that these are the 4 movement skills I want to be using, and I need smokescreen scene here as well as shadow explosion, because shadow explosion is pretty much the link to big damage upon a target. So while it's like combos is you gotta get all 3 of those marks up before you want to use Wheel of Wrath, but you don't want to always like risk it unless you know you CC'd your target. So essentially your inputs is like Ghost Greeting, Ankle Cutter, and then maybe Crescent Blade. And then from there you can either smokescreen, cancel any of these 4 skills as well as the Wheel of Wrath. So these 5 skills you can cancel into smokescreen. So you can cancel into smokescreen from Ghost Greeting, you can cancel into smokescreen from Ankle Cutter, from Crescent Slash as well, and also from Danse Macabre. Right after you drop Wheel of Wrath, the moment you throw the blade up, you can cancel half the attack with a smokescreen or let it go through before you cancel. And then afterwards, you gotta press Shift E for Flash Slash if you want some extra damage on top that hits really hard. So, and then it comes out much faster. But if you just use Flash Slash itself, God, I can't say those 2 words back to back. If you just want to use Flash Slash by itself, the initial like smackdown on the floor where you cause a mini smoke or fake smoke screen. This is completely unprotected, by the way, until you disappear, and it's pretty awful. So you can actually get canceled out of your attack. But if you also there's been like some weird things that I've done with this skill, because it says like Shift E, and when using the skill press a directional button to move in that direction. It does place you like somewhere else, but I've tried to do that with smokescreen and it just kind of cancels you out. Either my fingers are just failing at doing something, or that just simply doesn't work. So I haven't really like gotten it to work that way after a smokescreen, because that speed up is just like so much better. But I can't seem to do it, so like I have to just use it and then hold that direction, because the moment you disappear you can't reposition anymore. So it's very confusing utilizing Flash Slash, but you should definitely learn to like work it into your rotation of skills however you're using it, because Flash Slash is very useful both in PvE and PvP. Like that thing is big damage, and they almost share the same cooldown with smokescreen. So every time your smokescreen is up, instinctively you should know that your Flash Slash is 1 second behind it. So it's not really, so you just kind of keep working that in there. So that's pretty much Succession is mostly importance upon the Flash Slash is what I want to iterate. The other things are like from the previous Kuno guides from Awakening, with pre-awakening stuff in there, is still canceling Shadow Stomp as fast as you can. And then Shadow Clone is a little bit different as well in Succession. You can activate this without needing to have a Shadow Stomp buff like in previously from pre-awakening and awakening days, where you had to use Shadow Stomp in order to use Shadow Clone while the buff is effective. But in Succession, you can just use Shadow Clone whenever you want. You don't need to have a Shadow Stomp go off before you can use it. But you have to put it in a hotkey though. If you just use it after Shadow Stomp and press spacebar, then you can use it right away, so you don't have to hotkey. But sometimes you don't want to miss as well, so you want to hotkey that. And then you follow through with a Shadow Explosion, hopefully on the target on the floor, and you'll get all 3 of the buffs of Ninjutsu, Spirit, Ghost, and Soul. And then afterwards you either topple up with a Danse Macabre or the Wheel of Wrath. Also, when you have the all 3 buffs, Danse Macabre can be aimed like pretty far. I never really measured the distance because it doesn't happen that often, but it's pretty freaking far, as you can tell. So that's how you can actually like just blink over and just assassinate somebody if you feel like it. And most of all of this is completely unprotected, so it's very dangerous playing a Kuno. The only super armor that's pretty much reliable is your Tendon Cutter for the entire duration of all 3 hits on top of the last hit as well. And the last hit is a Blink Strike that causes floating, which is extremely nice. But the rest of her kit is actually quite unprotected. Block Jump is the only other thing that'll help you survive, as well as the Smoke Screen and the Flash Slash. So if you go Smoke Screen into Flash Slash, that's pretty much super armor all the way through and a little bit of iframe. But if you just use Flash Slash by itself, you're completely vulnerable at the beginning of the attack. But then once you disappear, your attack will succeed and stiffen and probably chunk people quite hard. So just kind of give wary to it. And the 100% Flash Slash is not weak, but it's takes forever to go off, but it pretty much is like a kamikaze bomb. So if you jump into a crowd of people and use your 100%, you're either going to get it off and kill everyone around you, or somebody's going to stop you and absolutely destroy you before your 100% goes off and your 100 rage just disappears. So when you have your E buff on, you want to make use of that as much as you can. So like when you have E buff, you can pretty much definitely catch somebody from all the way over here. So this is like some extreme stuff right here, and that's, you can traverse like all that distance from that tree to this tree in about like less than a second or two. I'm not exactly warmed up right now, but I'm pretty sure in a warmed up environment I'd be going a lot faster than this. So after tendon cutter as well, you can also do smoke screen was another thing I wanted to go over. So tendon cutter, if you just do the 3 hits, you can't smoke screen cancel out of that. But if you do the 3 hits plus the last hit, the LMB for extra hit, then you can do a smoke screen after that too as well. So you can do that and then just go into a flash slash like that. And then when you're doing the 100%, you can also reposition yourself 3 times. Just make sure you don't hold shift, because if you hold shift like I just did there earlier, then your thing just cancels. And then you're just missing a big chunk of damage for no reason. Because it's, what is that, 18 times 7 x 4 each time. And the last one is times 6. So yeah, that's a huge amount of damage that triggers 3 times. So try not to go step out of your flash slash. You're just eliminating damage. Yeah, so when you land, it doesn't really do any damage. That's actually just a CC hit. It's only when she whips her sword back is when the damage comes out. So flash slash is kind of awful if you're just not really thinking about what your character's doing. So apart from that, those are the stresses of playing Kuno Succession. Movement, like I said, that's, and then either you're gonna get into a habit of smoke screen into flash slash all the time and forget to use shadow stomp to boost yourself even forward further than that. Oh, and then yeah, so like, you know, you can sort of rotate your skills however you wish. As well, using your BAMs, you can push that movement even further. So, oh no, oh my god, it's not working anymore. Alright, so let's see here. What up? Okay, so it's Ghost, Ankle, Crescent, into Dance, Smoke, and Shadow Stomp. Or you can do it in any other order the hell you want. So, and it's what, like, and then into Ankle Cutter, into Heart Snatch, Sinew Cut, or whatever. You can really jump in and out of like battles or dip in and out very quickly because there's so much burst movement. But then afterwards it kind of ceases for like a 5-6 seconds where you sort of don't have movement. But that burst is really far and strong. It's just a lot of finger work, and it can get really confusing if you're not used to it yet. And like, I'm in a bad, terrible muscle memory habit where I keep doing flash slash after smoke screen, and that's why this isn't working out in demonstration. Alright, so hopefully I don't freaking forget it this time. Alright, so you can actually go quite far from that. So other than that though, that's really all I wanted to go over. Sinew Cut is nice, I like it. Other people take Oni Shadow, which lets you stay invisible every time you ghost step. For me, I just like to drop a little, like, you know, trap there. So that's why I use the Sinew Cut instead of the Oni Shadow. But I mean, I could swap it out too, since I have the old Moon Book. So, but my E-buff's about to run out, so I'm not gonna do that. In any case though, that's pretty much all I wanted to go over in terms of Kuno Succession here. It's actually very tiring on the fingers. I didn't think it was going to be that extreme until I started grinding and doing some PvP on it. And some other things I just have some gripes about the class is that obviously the lack of protection is quite high. But then again, you gotta really just get used to being a skilled player at using your movements and positioning and dodging and the blink strikes to your advantage. And you gotta pick and choose your battles, because obviously you do not have that AoE potential that Awakening has with the spin to win anymore. Of that super armor and the super armor half moon and the other super armor of something else. I don't even remember if there was another one, but that's pretty much the trade-off. So that's it. Here's some footage, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope this helped you out. Yeah, and one of the last gripes I had about like the class was that I just wish ankle cutter wasn't such a long cooldown. Like 10 seconds is still really long, even having experienced the class quite a bit of time now. I wish it actually just shared the same cooldown as Ghost Greeting, which would be 9 seconds. I mean, it's 1 second longer, but whatever. I actually wish there was actually just the matched same timing. Not really a big deal. I don't think it should be down to 7 now after I had some experience from the first impression video, but I do believe it. I wish it was at 9 or 8. But 7 would be too short, or just the same as Ghost Greeting, but whatever.